In a small village tucked beside the wide, whispering sea, there lived an old man named Elian. The people in the village didn't know much about him. He lived in a little stone cottage that sat right on the edge of the world, where the green land met the great blue water. Elian was a quiet man. His words were few, like rare shells you might find only once in a long while on the beach. He had kind eyes though, the color of the sea just before a storm. He spent his days mending fishing nets and carving small wooden birds that looked so real you'd think they might sing. But it was what he did in the evening that made him special to everyone. He was known simply as the Lantern Keeper. Every single evening, just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and soft purple, Elian would begin his work. He had a collection of old lanterns, each one made of dark metal and clear, sturdy glass. He would carefully fill each one with oil, trim the wicks, and wipe the glass until it shone. Then, with a long, steady pole, he would walk the winding cliffside path. One by one, he would hang the lanterns on the old wooden posts that lined the trail. The path was tricky and dangerous in the dark, and his lights made it safe for fishermen returning late, or for anyone who needed to walk along the cliffs after sundown. When people would thank him, which they often did, he would just nod his head slowly. Sometimes, if they asked why he did it, he would offer a small, quiet smile and say, "I like to light peace." It was a strange thing to say, but it felt right. The warm, gentle glow of the lanterns did feel like peace. It was a steady, quiet promise that someone was watching over the path, making the dark a little less dark. The light chased away the deep shadows and gave comfort to those who walked in its soft circle. It was a simple act, but it meant the world to the people of the village. Most people thought Elian lit the lanterns just to be kind, to help his neighbors. And that was true, he did. But there was another reason, a deeper one that he held close to his heart like a secret. The lights were not just for the fishermen or the travelers. They were for him too. Each small flame he lit was a memory, one for his wife, who had a laugh that sounded like wind chimes, and one for his son, who loved to chase the waves along the shore. They were gone now, lost to the very sea he lived beside. Lighting the lanterns was his way of remembering them, of sending a little bit of light out into the world for them wherever they were. The evening of our story began just like any other. The date was July 2nd, 2025, and a cool breeze was drifting in from the water, carrying the salty smell of the ocean. The sun was a fiery globe sinking into the waves, leaving streaks of pink and gold across the clouds. Elian gathered his lanterns, his movements slow and practiced. He had done this thousands of times. He pulled on his worn wool coat, picked up his long pole, and set out on the familiar path. The first post was near his cottage, and he hung the first lantern, its flame flickering to life like a brand new star. He felt the usual quiet ache in his heart, the one that always came with the memories. He walked on, his boots crunching softly on the gravel path. He moved from one post to the next, hanging each lantern with a gentle and deliberate motion. The world grew darker around him, but the path behind him grew brighter, a string of warm, golden pearls against the deep blue twilight. This was his rhythm, his ritual. It was a silent conversation he had with the past, with the two people he missed more than words could say. The gentle light seemed to push back not just the darkness of the night, but the darkness of his own sorrow, even if only for a little while. He found a strange sort of comfort in the repetition, in the simple, important task. But then, something was different. Up ahead, where the path curved sharply around a large rock, a light was already shining. It was not one of his lanterns, he could tell. This one was smaller, and the light it cast seemed to tremble just a little. Elian stopped. He stood perfectly still, his hand gripping the pole tightly. In all his years as the Lantern Keeper, this had never happened before. Someone else was on his path. Someone else was lighting the way. He felt a strange mix of confusion and curiosity. Who would be out here, doing his job? The light was a soft beacon calling him forward. He approached the light slowly, his footsteps quiet. As he got closer, he saw the shape of a person standing beside the post. It was a young woman, her shoulders slumped, and her head bowed. She was looking out at the dark, endless sea. She had hung a small, simple paper lantern on the post, and its light illuminated the soft tears on her cheeks. She did not seem to hear him coming. She was lost in her own world of sadness, surrounded by the vastness of the ocean and the coming night. Elian paused a few feet away, not wanting to startle her. He understood this kind of quiet grief. He knew it well. The young woman must have sensed him there because she turned her head slowly. Her eyes were red from crying, but when she saw Elian standing there with his own lanterns, a flicker of recognition crossed her face. "You're him," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the sound of the waves below. "You're the lantern keeper." Elian simply nodded, his expression gentle. He didn't need to ask what was wrong. He could see the same hurt in her eyes that he often saw in his own reflection. He knew she was carrying a heavy weight in her heart, one that was too big to carry alone. "I come here sometimes," she said, wiping a tear from her cheek with the back of her hand. "When things feel too dark, your lights, they always helped." She looked from Elian to the string of glowing lanterns that now stretched behind him along the path. "They made me feel like I wasn't the only one awake in the world. Like someone else was out there, holding back the night. It made the sadness feel smaller." Her words were a gift. All this time he thought his lights were just for safety, for memory. He never knew they were also a message of hope to a stranger. A feeling bloomed in Elian's chest, one he hadn't felt in a very long time. It felt like warmth, like the sun on his face after a long winter. He was used to giving comfort, but he was not used to receiving it. Hearing that his simple act had reached someone so deeply made his own burden feel a little lighter. He was not just the keeper of the lanterns, he was the keeper of a small piece of her hope. He looked at her, then at the unlit lantern he held in his hand. He had one more to hang at the end of the path. Without a word, Elian held out the lantern toward her. He offered her the box of matches. It was an invitation to share the task, to share the light. The young woman looked at the lantern, then at his kind, weathered face. A small, watery smile touched her lips. She took the matches, her fingers brushing against his. Together, they opened the glass door of the lantern. She struck a match, and in the cup of their hands, a new flame sputtered to life. For a moment they both just watched it burn, a tiny, brilliant star created by the two of them. Together, they walked to the very last post at the end of the cliff. The young woman, whose name he learned was Lily, held the lantern while Elian prepared the hook. She carefully hung the final light, and its glow joined the others, completing the shining chain that held the darkness at bay. They stood there for a long time, side by side, not speaking. They didn't need to. The silence between them was not empty, it was full of a shared understanding. In that quiet moment, Elian realized he was not just lighting a path for others. Lily had lit a path for him too, leading him out of his own lonely grief for a little while. He felt the heavy weight on his own heart lift, just a little. The light from the lantern seemed to shine inward, warming the cold places inside him. For years he had been the one giving, the one caring for the path. Tonight, someone had cared for him in return, simply by sharing their own story and their own light. He understood that his ritual was not just about remembering what was lost. It was also about connecting with what was still here. He was not just the lantern keeper. He was part of a larger story, one of hope and healing that stretched far beyond his own personal sorrow. That night something changed for Elian. His evening walk was no longer a solitary journey into his memories. Sometimes Lily would be there, waiting for him with her own small lantern. They would walk the path together, lighting the way side by side. They learned that grief is a heavy stone, but it is easier to carry when someone helps you hold it. They found healing not in forgetting their sadness, but in sharing it under the soft, peaceful glow of the lanterns. Their shared ritual became a quiet testament to the strength they found in each other's company. And so, the story of the Lantern Keeper reminds us of a simple and powerful truth. Light is more than just a way to see in the dark. It is a guide when we are lost. It is a comfort when we are hurting. It is a quiet signal that flashes across the great wide darkness, telling us that we are not alone. It reminds us that even in our saddest moments, there is a path forward. And sometimes, the most important thing we can do is share our flame with someone else, and in doing so, we find our own way home.